But I'm curious to what extent the allegorizing move, which permeates your account, why that takes such a central role. Because it seems to me there are a lot of ways to be effectively modified, some of which involve the course of the eye over the painting, some of which involve, in a sense, inhabiting the secondary world that the painting has created, many of which could alter our affective relation to the world. But you move fairly consistently towards a mode of allegorization, and I'm curious why
that's a very good
that's
question.
so.
It would be not so easy for me to justify it. Here I'll give you some background which will more explain my view rather than justify it. Jackie, my wife, and I, years ago, were very influenced by participating in these meetings, group meetings of Gestalt therapy, where you are asked to identify with parts of your dream, for example, where you'll have a dream of, let's say a chair or a vase or whatever, and the therapist would say, okay, now become the vase. And then you'd have to say, okay, I'm a vase, and he would put you in, I don't know how familiar you are with this way of thinking, but you then have to become a vase, so you stand like a vase, and the person would then ask you some questions. What does it be? How does it feel to be a vase? And you'd say, well, I'm stiff, and I'm fragile, and I'm brittle, or whatever. Well, doing this many, many times persuaded me, when I began to think about various objects just on my own. I would take, in the book, I talk about looking at an apple. I just look at the apple. And then later I talk about my wallet, and I just spend some time with it. And in each case, what seemed to emerge was the thesis of Gestalt therapy, namely that we personalize our objects. And so, to take up your point, you can gaze, this is my own belief, you can gaze at this band and say, well, emotionally I'm modified by it. But I think further, it's not just an emotional response, and I think you also learn more by making the next step, taking the next step, namely where you say, I am this band of orange. I am orange. And then what I find by doing that is that you get much more information out of what you feel and believe about that than you would just by casting your eye over it. So it's more a pragmatic move, I think. You can name it what you want to name it, but by personifying it, I think you will gain more data, to use a psychologist's word, more information about it.
If I can follow up just very briefly, and then I clearly have to go read your book, because I completely follow you up to the point where it moves over into outright allegory. And I'm not saying, allegory is a really interesting way of reading, so I'm not saying, no, let's not allegorize, just there doesn't seem to be an inevitable move from that.
There doesn't.
Becoming the painting, in fact, almost seems to me to be an alternative to allegory. If I'm in, for example, if I'm in that Vermeer painting in some sense and experiencing and being those people, then do I need to turn it into an allegory of the commercial versus the intimate? Or do I need to do I inevitably, and again, I'm not saying don't do it. Allegory has a noble history in many respects and has rescued many works of art, but do I need to move into the allegorization of Rothko in order to experience many of the things you said about depth and height and boundary and reach and shine as something that expands myself? Do I need to make the allegorical move?
What is your resistance to that? I'll turn asked like a true teacher now. Why do you resist that idea?
I guess don't think I'm resisting the idea. I think I'm resisting its inevitability, or its being the way to read. We're familiar with traditions in which allegory becomes the way to read. When I teach history of literary theory to my students, we go through, periods. We go through Dante, we look at Augustine. There are points when allegory is the way to read.
Of course.
the way to find meaning. And I don't think it is the only way to find meaning. It's one of many ways. And many of it's just that many of the things you talk about strike me as being, you could hold many of the things you've said and they could still eventuate in a somewhat different approach. But now I'll shut up and let other people.
We're not far apart on that anyway. It's more, I find personally that by allegorizing it, as I was saying before, I'm able to learn more about what I really feel about it. But it doesn't seem to me to be absolutely necessary. It's more when I try to understand what do my emotions mean and how can they reveal to me. You know how you're in a room sometime and you'll feel something and it'll just be a fleeting sensation. Well, how do I find more about it? This is my way of doing it, and it seems to be very effective for me. Therefore, I recommend it to you in the audience, but I can't say you have to do it this way. And of course, I don't mean allegory in the sense that, in Dante's sense, of this means this and this means this. It's the allegorization of one's own personal experience.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, thank you.